cloth was to be put upon her, and gazed on her with such wonder. She was so beautiful. Then he called his son and told him that he had only a false bride, for that she was merely a waiting maid, while the true bride stood by. And the young king rejoiced when he saw her beauty, and heard how meek and patient she had been. And without saying anything to the false bride, the king ordered a great feast to be got ready for all his court. The bridegroom sat at the top, and the false princess on one side, and the true one on the other. But nobody knew her again, for her beauty was quite dazzling to their eyes, and she did not seem at all like the late goose girl, now that she had her brilliant dress on. When they had eaten and drank and were very merry, the old king said he would tell them a tale. So he began and told all the story of the princess, as if it was one that he had once heard. And he asked the true waiting maid what she thought ought to be done to anyone who would behave thus. Nothing better, said this false bride, than that she be thrown into a cusk sack round with sharp nails, and that 2 white horses should be put to it, and should drag it from the street to street till she was dead. Thou art she, said the old king, and as thou hast judged yourself, so shall it be done to thee. And the young king was then married to his true wife, and they reigned over the kingdom in peace and happiness all their lives. And the good fairy came to see them and restored the faithful Falada to life again. The end. What?
How messed up is that story? This is actually me here. So we have about 13 minutes left. Ooh, why is my Discord up? I have about 15 minutes left. 13 minutes now. 13 minutes left here. I just logged into Palia, and I really want to get that home tour achievement. So we're going to do some home tours while I read stories in like an AFK scene in all of them. So let me pull up the new YouTube live link. And it was definitely ear opening, I guess, to, is my microphone on? Yeah, it is. To listen back to the stories and like how I started the Grimm fairy tales, how some of them have gone. Some of them I haven't edited yet, but to hear how the vocal warm-ups are going. Essentially, that's what these stories are for me, is getting my voice warmed up and increasing the endurance and stamina that I have for reading out loud. It's totally different reading in your head than reading aloud. I've just put lotion on my face, and now there's like cat hairs that are caught on my glasses, on my nose, and it is quite itchy. Quite itchy. So I'm gonna get set up. should be working there. The Adventures of Chance and Partlet. Or, what did we do before? Grimm Fairy Tales. The Adventures of Chance and Partlet. How they went to the mountains to eat nuts. The nuts are quite ripe now, said Chance to his wife Partlet. Suppose we go together to the mountains and eat as many as we can, before the squirrel takes them all away. With all my heart, said Partlet. Let us go and make a holiday of it together. So they went to the mountains, and as it was a lovely day, they stayed there till the evening. Now whether it was that they had eaten so many nuts that they could not walk, or whether they were lazy and would not, I do not know. However, they took it into their heads that for some reason it went away by itself. Okay. So they went to the mountains, and as it was a lovely day, they stayed there till the evening. Now whether it was that they had eaten so many nuts that they could not walk, or whether they were lazy and would not, I do not know. However, they took it into their heads that it did not become them to go home on foot. So Chance began to build a little carriage of nutshells, and when it was finished, Partlet jumped into it and sat down, and bid Chance harness himself to it, and draw her home. That's a good joke, said Chance. No, that will never do. I had rather by half walk home. I'll sit out of the box and be coachman if you like, but I'll not draw. While this was passing, a duck came quacking up and cried out, You thieving vagabonds, what business have you in my grounds? I'll give it to you well for your insolence. And upon that she fell upon Chance most lustily. But Chance was no coward, and returned the duck's blows with his sharp spurs so fiercely that she soon began to cry out for mercy, which was only granted her upon condition that she would draw the carriage home for them. This she agreed to do, and Chance got up upon the box and drove, crying, Now, Duck, get on as fast as you can, and away they went at a pretty good pace. After they had traveled along a little way, they met a needle and a pin walking together along the road, and the needle cried out, Stop, stop, and said it was so dark that they could hardly find their way, and such dirty walking they could not get on at all. He told them that he and his friend the pin had been at a public house a few miles off, and had sat drinking till they had forgotten how late it was. He begged, therefore, that the travelers would be so kind as to give them a lift in their carriage. Chance, observing that they were but thin fellows and not likely to take up much room, told them that they might ride, but made them promise not to dirty the wheels of the carriage in getting in, nor to tread on Partlet's toes. Late at night they arrived at the inn, and as it was bad traveling in the dark, and the duck seemed much tired, and waddled about a good deal from one side to the other, they made up their minds to fix their quarters there. But the landlord at first was unwilling, and said his house was full, thinking they might not be very respectable company. However, they spoke civilly to him, and gave him the egg which Partlet had lain by the way, and said they would give him the duck, who was in the habit of laying one every day. So at last he let them come in, and they bespoke a handsome supper, and spent the evening very jollily. Early in the morning, before it was quite light, and when nobody was stirring in the inn, Chance awakened his wife, and fetching the egg, they pecked a hole in it, ate it up, and threw the shells into the fireplace. They then went to the pin and needle, who were fast asleep, and seizing them by the heads, stuck one into the landlord's easy chair, and the other into his handkerchief, and having done this, they crept away as softly as possible. However, the duck, who slept in their open air in the yard, heard them coming, and jumping into the brook which ran close by the inn, soon swam out of their reach. An hour or two afterwards, the landlord got up, and took his handkerchief to wipe his face, but the pin ran into him and pricked him. Then he walked into the kitchen to light his pipe at the fire, but when he stirred it up, the eggshells flew into his eyes and almost blinded him. "Bless me," he said, "all the world seems to have a design against my head this morning." And so saying, he threw himself sulkily into his easy-chair. But oh dear, the needle ran into him, and this time the pain was not in his head. He now flew into a very great passion, and suspecting the company who had come in the night before, he went to look after them. But they were all off, so he swore that he never again would take in such a troop of vagabonds, who ate a great deal, paid no reckoning, and gave him nothing for his trouble but their apish tricks. Part 2. How Chance and Partlet went to visit Mr. Korbes. Another day, Chance and Partlet wished to ride out together. So Chance built a handsome carriage with 4 red wheels, and harnessed 6 mice to it, and then he and Partlet got into the carriage, and away they drove. Soon afterwards a cat met them, and said, "Where are you going?" And Chance replied, "All on our way, to visit to pay, to Mr. Korbes, the fox today." Then the cat said, "Take me with you." Chance said, "With all my heart. Get up behind, and be sure you do not fall off. Take care of this handsome coach of mine, nor dirty my pretty red wheels so fine. Now mice be ready, and wheels run steady, for we are going to visit a pay to Mr. Korbes, the fox today." Soon after came up a millstone, an egg, a duck, and a pin, and Chance gave them all leave to get into the carriage and go with them. When they arrived at Mr. Korbes' house, he was not at home. So the mice drew the carriage into the coach-house. Chance and Partlet flew up a beam. The cat sat down in the fireplace. The duck got into a washing canister, and Pin stuck himself into the bed-pillow. The millstone laid himself over the house door, and the egg rolled himself up in the towel. When Mr. Korbes came home, he went to the fireplace to make a fire, but the cat threw all the ashes in his eyes. So he ran to the kitchen to wash himself, but there the duck splashed all the water in his face, and when he tried to wipe himself, the egg broke to pieces in the towel all over his face and eyes. Then he was very angry, and went without his supper to bed. But when he laid his head on the pillow, the pin ran into his cheek. At this he became quite furious, and jumping up, would have run out of the house, but when he came to the door, the millstone fell down on his head and killed him on the spot. These stories are crazy. Part 3. How Partlet died and was buried, and how Chance died of grief. Another day, Chance and Partlet agreed to go again to the mountains to eat nuts, and it was settled that all the nuts which they found should be shared equally between them. Now Partlet found a very large nut, but she said nothing about it to Chance, and kept it all to herself. However, it was so big that she could not swallow it, and it was stuck in her throat. Then she was in a great fright, and cried out to Chance, "Pray run as fast as you can, and fetch me some water, or I shall be choked." Chance ran as fast as he could to the river, and said, "River, give me some water, for Partlet lies in the mountain and will be choked by a great nut." The river said, "Run first to the bride, and ask her for a silken cord to draw up the water." Chance ran to the bride, and said, "Bride, you must give me a silken cord, for then the river will give me water, and the water I will carry to Partlet, who lies on the mountain and will be choked by a great nut." But the bride said, "Run first and bring me my garland that is hanging on a willow in the garden." Then Chance ran to the garden and took the garland from the burrow where it hung, and brought it to the bride. And then the bride gave him the silken cord, and he took the silken cord to the river, and the river gave him water, and he carried the water to Partlet. But in the meantime she was choked by the great nut, and lay quite dead, and never moved any more. Then Chance was very sorry, and cried bitterly, and all the beasts came and wept with him over poor Partlet. And 6 mice built a little hearse to carry her to her grave, and when it was ready, they harnessed themselves before it, and Chance drove them. On the way they met the fox. "Where are you going, Chance?" said he. "To bury my partlet," said the other. "May I go with you?" said the fox. "Yes, but you must get up behind, or my horses will not be able to draw you." Then the fox got up behind, and presently the wolf, the bear, the goat, and all the beasts of the wood came and climbed upon the hearse. So on they went till they came to a rapid stream. "How shall we get over?" said Chance. Then said a straw, "I will lay myself across, and you may pass over upon me." But as the mice were going over, the straw slipped away and fell into the water, and the 6 mice all fell in and were drowned. What was to be done? Then a large log of wood came and said, "I am big enough, I will lay myself across the stream, and you shall pass over upon me." So he laid himself down, but they managed so clumsily that the log of wood fell in and was carried away by the stream. Then a stone, who saw what had happened, came up and kindly offered to help poor Chance by laying himself across the stream, and this time he got safely to the other side with the hearse, and managed to get Partlet out of it, but the fox and the other mourners, who were sitting behind, were too heavy, and fell back into the water, and were all carried away by the stream and drowned. Thus Chance was left alone with his dead Partlet, and having dug a grave for her, he laid her in it, and made a little hillock over her. Then he sat down by the grave, and wept and mourned, till at last he died too. So all were dead. Well, the next story is Rapunzel. That story fit very well with Grimm fairy tales being absolutely crazy. The Adventures of Chance and Partlet is one of the lesser-known collections in the Grimm fairy tales by Jacob Grimm and Wilhelm Grimm. Rather than a single story, it is a series of 3 loosely connected tales about a rooster, Chance, and a hen, Partlet. Like many Grimm tales, the stories blend humor, absurdity, and unexpectedly dark endings, while teaching lessons about pride, selfishness, and the unpredictability of fate. Summary, Part 1, The Journey Home. Chance and his wife, Partlet, travel to the mountains to feast on nuts. After overeating, they decide they are too tired or too proud to walk home. Chance builds a carriage from nutshells. Partlet expects Chance to pull the carriage, but he refuses. They force a duck to pull it instead after defeating her in a fight. Along the way, they give a ride to a needle and a pin. They spend the night at an inn, but secretly leave before paying. Before leaving, they hide the pin and needle where they will injure the innkeeper and leave eggshells in the fireplace. The innkeeper is pricked, burned, and blinded by the ashes, realizing he has been tricked. Lesson: cleverness without morality becomes selfishness. The pair wins, but only through deceit and exploiting others. Part 2, Visiting Mr. Korbes. Chance and Partlet travel to visit the mysterious Mr. Korbes with a group of unusual companions, including a cat, duck, egg, pin, and millstone. When they arrive, Mr. Korbes is absent, so each hides somewhere in the house. When Mr. Korbes returns, the cat throws ashes into his eye. The duck splashes him. The egg breaks on his face. The pin pricks him in bed. Finally, Millstone falls and kills him. The story explains what Mr. Korbes did to deserve the fate. Sometimes Grimm tales deliberately deny readers a moral explanation. Evil may be punished, but sometimes punishment appears arbitrary, reflecting the unpredictability of medieval folklore rather than modern storytelling. Part 3, Partlet's Death. Partlet secretly keeps a large nut for herself instead of sharing it. She chokes on the nut. Chance desperately searches for water. Every helper demands another task first, creating a long chain of errands. By the time he returns, Partlet has died. Heartbroken, Chance organizes an elaborate funeral. Many animals join the procession. Most of them die while attempting to cross a stream. Chance buries Partlet. He mourns beside her grave until he also dies. This ending is among the saddest in the Grimm collection. Major themes here are, for the first story, pride and vanity. The first story begins because the couple refuse to walk home after overeating. Their pride causes unnecessary complications. The Grimm brothers often portray pride as leading to foolish decisions. 2. The second story. Partlet secretly keeps the largest nut for herself. I guess this isn't by story, this is just major themes. Okay. 2. Selfishness. Partlet secretly keeps the largest nut for herself. Ironically, this selfish act causes her own death. This reinforces the fairy tale idea that greed often punishes itself. 3. Consequences. Although the stories are whimsical, nearly every action has consequences. Examples include stealing food, tricking others, refusing to share, taking advantage of kindness. Even when consequences are delayed, they eventually arrive. 4. Death as part of life. Unlike modern children's stories, Grimm tales rarely avoid death. Here, death is sudden, ordinary, and irreversible. The stories suggest that life is fragile and cannot always be controlled. 5. Absurdity. Many events are intentionally ridiculous. Ducks pulling carriages, pins riding in wagons, talking stones, funeral processions of woodland animals. This playful nonsense reflects older oral storytelling traditions where entertainment mattered as much as moral instruction. Literary theory, folklore theory. These stories preserve elements of early European oral traditions. Talking animals, magical logic, repetition, cumulative sequences, exaggerated justice. They were meant to be memorable when told aloud. The structuralism of the stories rely on repeated opposites, sharing versus selfishness, community versus individual greed, life versus death, Every joyful event eventually ends. Cleverness versus kindness. Intelligence without compassion becomes cruelty. Order versus chaos. Small actions spiral into unexpected disasters. The psychoanalytical interpretation. These animals often represent human personalities. Chance symbolizes responsibility, pride, and loyalty. Partlet represents appetite, desire, and impulsiveness. The choking episode can symbolize how excessive desire becomes self-destructive. Moral interpretation. Unlike later Victorian fairy tales, Grimm stories often present morality indirectly. Rather than saying, "Don't be greedy," the tale demonstrates greed through consequences. Readers are expected to infer the lessons themselves. Symbols, nuts, temptation, abundance, greed. Carriage, vanity and social status. Pin and needle, small problems that become painful later. Duck, forced labor and exploitation. River, the boundary between life and death. Funeral, acceptance of morality. Or mortality. Both applicable. Animals, human virtues and flaws in symbolic form. Commentary. At first glance, The Adventures of Chance and Partlet feels like a series of silly animal adventures. On closer reading, however, it reflects several recurring Grimm concerns. Even minor selfish acts can have major consequences. Intelligence without kindness becomes manipulation. Death is an ordinary part of existence, not something to be hidden. The world is unpredictable, and not every event receives a satisfying explanation. The final tale is especially... I always mess up saying this word aloud. The final tale is especially poignant. Paul. Chance's frantic attempt to save Partlet is continually delayed by others' demands, suggesting that bureaucracy, obligation, or simple bad luck can prevent good intentions from succeeding. His grief-driven death emphasizes the depth of love and loss in a way that contrasts sharply with the comic tone of the earlier adventures. Overall, the collection moves from comedy to dark comedy to tragedy, illustrating the Grimm brothers' distinctive ability to blend humor with profound reflections on human nature and mortality. Okay, cool. Well, perfect timing. We got 15 seconds left in that 25 timer, and then we're about to go into a 5-minute break. So if you're in chat, say hello if you'd like to. If not, keep lurking. Keep lurking. Keep lurking. And then TikTok, what's up? We're on the purple app. If you'd like to see the gameplay. Grimm Fairy Tales. Rapunzel. There once was a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress, who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden, when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion, Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it. She quite pined away, and began to look pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed, and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't eat some of the rampion, which is in the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man, who loved her, thought, "Sooner let your wife die, bring her some of the rampion yourself, let it cost what it will." At twilight he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress. Why is it so hard for me to say that word? I don't know. Enchantress. Hastily clutched a handful of rampion and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it greedily. It tasted so good to her, so very good, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again. But when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," she said with an angry look, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah," he answered, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window, and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not got some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened, and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother." The man in his terror consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once. "Give the child the name of Rapunzel." Then she took her away from her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower, which lay in a forest, and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then her hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. Then he heard a song, which was so charming that he stood and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her and look for the door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once, when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," he said, and the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man, such as her eyes had never yet beheld, came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "He will love me more than that old Dame Gothel does." And she said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a bucket or a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it. And when that is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until the time he should come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this, until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son. He is with me in a moment." "Ah, you wicked child!" cried the enchantress. "What do I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice around her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snap, they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, however, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair, which she had cut off, to the hook of the window, and when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me," she let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "you would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you, and you will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered, quite blind, about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did not but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived. In wretchedness he heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it, and when he approached, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. Two of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happy and contented. Okay. Okay. Well, that's a story. That's a story. A story that has been remade many times. let's read during the last 9 minutes. The same as we did. I'll see you later. See you later. That witchy lady. We love that witchy lady. She is on the Purple app. She streams Palea and Where Winds Meet. And it is just a joy watching this streamer. So let's do a shout out to her again. We did one earlier. But so many prompts later, it got lost. So there we go. Wonderful. That witchy lady. This Gen X PNG tuber is casting spells in Palea and Where Winds Meet, all while keeping the vibes chill and the drops enabled. From adventuring to shenanigans, they're serving up mature content with a side of dorky fun. Join the gathering, but remember it's 18 plus only. Don't worry, it's nothing X-rated. The conversations are fun. We do talk about spicy books sometimes, or like quotes from the spicy books. Quotes from the spicy books. Okie dokie. Let's see. Right, what were we doing? About to talk about Rapunzel, right? Summary. Rapunzel is one, so the other story was one of the least known fairy tales. Rapunzel is one of the best known. And this is ChatGPT giving us a summary, not us, because I'm not going to sit and do a breakdown of these fairy tales. This is vocal warm-ups, vocal training, right? For me. So I'm not necessarily going to do a whole bunch of homework for streams, but ChatGPT does come in clutch to give us a general summary in an organized manner so that I can do other things in my life. And I think that using AI in this manner is very helpful for a lot of people. I don't believe that we should be reading AI-generated stories all the time. But I do see the benefits of having to supplement different areas. I'm not like a teacher, right? So it's not like I'm going over this information with the intention to grade other people and I'm expecting them to like not use AI or something like that. I'm on Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok right now talking about fairy tales while I do vocal training. So take it for what it is. So Rapunzel, it's a Grimm fairy tale. Summary: Rapunzel is one of the best known fairy tales collected by Jacob Grimm and Wilhelm Grimm. In Grimm's fairy tales, although the brothers Grimm popularized the story, it is based on earlier European folk tales, particularly the French tale Percinet by Charlotte Rose de Caumont de la Force. A tale follows a young girl imprisoned in a tower whose extraordinary hair becomes both the means of her confinement and her eventual escape. Plot summary: a bargain before birth. A husband and a wife long for a child. During the wife's pregnancy, she becomes desperate to eat a rampnon, right? It's a plant, a leafy plant similar to lamb's lettuce, growing in the garden of a powerful enchantress. The husband steals the plant several times but is caught. The enchantress agrees to spare his life, but only if the couple gives her their unborn child. When the baby is born, the enchantress takes her and names her Rapunzel. Themes here are choices made by parents affect future generations. And I would like to say that when we started, Enchantress was very difficult for me to say out loud, and this story made me repeatedly say Enchantress. So there's that. It's different when you're reading the story a lot, like in your head, than reading it aloud over and over again. So this is why we practice. 2. Life in the Tower. When Rapunzel reaches adolescence, the enchantress locks her away in a tall tower with no stairs, no doors, and only one window. When the enchantress visits, she calls, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel lowers her long golden hair, allowing the enchantress to climb into the tower. The tower symbolizes isolation and complete control. Got about 3 minutes to go over this, and then we have a break. The prince. The prince hears Rapunzel singing from the tower. Hidden nearby, he watches the enchantress. The sentences are no longer working. Hidden nearby, he watches the enchantress use Rapunzel's hair to enter. The next day, he repeats the same words. Rapunzel lets him climb up. The two fall in love. In the Grimm version, the prince secretly visits many times. Discovery. Eventually, the enchantress realizes Rapunzel has been seeing someone. In earlier Grimm editions, Rapunzel innocently asks why the enchantress is harder to pull up than the prince. Later editions softened this scene so it would be more appropriate for children. The enchantress cuts Rapunzel's hair and banishes her into the wilderness. She then tricks the prince by using the cut hair. When he climbs to the tower, he finds only the enchantress. In despair, he jumps from the tower, and thorns blind him. Reunion. Rapunzel survives in the wilderness and gives birth to twins. Years later, the blind prince wanders until he hears her singing. They reunite. Rapunzel's tears fall onto his eyes, restoring his sight. The family returns to the prince's kingdom and lives happily ever after. Main themes here are freedom versus control. The central conflict is between imprisonment and independence. The enchantress attempts to completely control Rapunzel's home, relationships, and future. The story shows that love and personal freedom ultimately overcome domination. Growing up, Rapunzel's journey represents adolescence. She moves from dependence, innocence, isolation, to adulthood, love, and self-determination. Her imprisonment can be read as a metaphor for overprotective parenting. Love requires sacrifice. The prince suffers blindness. Rapunzel suffers exile. Both endure years of hardship before they can be together. Love is portrayed not as effortless romance, but as something strengthened through endurance. Why was that word hard? I don't know. But it was. Hope. Although the middle of the story is tragic, neither character gives up. Hope ultimately leads to reunion and healing. At its core, Rapunzel is about the transition from dependence to independence. It suggests that attempts to control another person's life cannot last forever. Growth, love, and freedom often require courage and the willingness to endure hardship. The story also reminds readers that genuine love is built on patience, resilience, and mutual care, not simply on romance. The main point, the central message, can be summarized as love and freedom are stronger than fear and control. Growing up often requires leaving behind confinement, whether physical or emotional. Healing and happiness may come only after perseverance through adversity. Start new session. So we went through all of our sessions that we started at the beginning of the day, which is amazing, but we're going to go into more sessions. So we're going to start in a few minutes. We're going to first go to um, another Palia home. Grimm fairy tales. Let's drink some water first. All right. Grimm fairy tales. Hansel and Gretel. Ooh. Grimm fairy tales. Hansel and Gretel. Hard by a great forest dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel, and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and once, when great dearth fell on the land, he could no longer procure even daily bread. Now, when he thought over this by night in his bed, and tossed about in his anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children, when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them, and give each one of them more pieces of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals will soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool," she said. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well plane the planks for our coffins." And she left him no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children, all the same," said the man. The 2 children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not distress yourself. I will soon find a way to help us." And when the old folks had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and crept outside. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like real silver pennies. Hansel stooped and stuffed the little pocket of his coat with as many as he could get in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and sleep in peace. God will not forsake us." And he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came and awoke the 2 children, saying, "Get up, you sluggards. We are going into the forest to fetch wood." She gave each a little piece of bread and said, "There is something for your dinner, but do not eat it up before then, for you will get nothing else." Gretel took the bread under her apron, as Hansel had the pebbles in his pocket. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. When they had walked a short time, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and did so again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at there, and stay behind for? Pay attention, and do not forget how to use your legs." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my little white cat, which is sitting up on the roof, and wants to say good-bye to me." The wife said, "Fool, that is not your little cat. That is the morning sun, which is shining on the chimneys." Hansel, however, had not been looking back at the cat, but had been constantly throwing one of the white pebble stones out of his pocket on the road. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire, that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together, as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lighted, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We will go into the forest and cut some wood. When we have done, we will come back and fetch you away." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when no one came, each ate a little piece of bread. and as they heard the strokes of the wood axe, they believed that their father was near. It was not an axe, however, but a branch which he had fastened to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards. And as they had been sitting such a long time, their eyes closed with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they awoke, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "How are we to get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little until the moon has risen, and then we will soon find the way." And when the full moon has risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand, and followed the pebbles, which shone like newly coined silver pieces, and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long, and by break of day came once more to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all." The father, however, rejoiced, for it had cut him to the heart to leave them behind alone. Not long afterwards there was once more great dearth throughout the land, and the children heard their mother saying at night to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have 1/2 loaf left, and that is the end. The children must go. We will take them farther away into the wood, so that they will not find their way out again. There is no other means of saving ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better for you to share the last mouthful with your children." The woman, however, would listen to nothing that he had to say, but scolded and reproached him. He who says A must B likewise, and he has yielded the first time, he had to do so a second time. The children, however, were still awake and had heard the conversation. When the old folks were asleep, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles, as he had done before. But the woman had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his little sister and said, "Do not cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. The good God will help us." Early in the morning came the woman and took the children out of the beds. Their piece of bread was given to them, but it was still smaller than the time before. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his in his pocket and often stood still and threw a morsel on the ground. "Hansel, why do you stop and look around?" said the father. "Go on." "I am looking back at my little pigeon, which is sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Fool," said the woman, "that is not your little pigeon, that is the morning sun that is shining on the chimney." Hansel, however, little by little threw all the crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, where they had never in their lives been before. Then a great fire was again made, and the mother said, "Just sit there, you children, and when you are tired you may sleep a little. We are going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening, when we are done, we will come and fetch you away." When it was noon, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel, who had scattered his by the way. Then they fell asleep and evening passed, but no one came to the poor children. They did not awake until it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, and then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have strewn about. They will show us our way home again." When the moon came, they set out, but they found no crumbs, for the many thousands of birds which fly about in the woods and fields had picked them all up. Hansel said to Gretel, "We shall soon find the way," but they did not find it. They walked the whole night and all the next day too, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest, and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries, which grew on the ground. And as they were so weary that their legs would carry them no longer, they lay down beneath a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 mornings since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, but they always came deeper into the forest, and if help did not come soon, they must die of hunger and weariness. When it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a burrow, which sang so delightfully that they stood still and listened to it. And when its song was over, it spread its wings and flew away before them. And when they followed it until they reached a little house, on the roof of which it alighted, and when they approached the little house, they saw that it was built of bread and covered with cakes. But the windows were of clear sugar. "We will set to work on that," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window. It will taste sweet." Hansel reached up above and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted. And Gretel leant against the window and nibbled at the panes. Then a soft voice cried from the parlor, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw, who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who liked the taste of the roof, tore down a great piece of it, and Gretel pushed out the whole of one round window-pane, sat down, and enjoyed herself with it. Suddenly the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills, who supported herself on crutches, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Do come in and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She took them both by the hand and led them into their little house. Then good food was set before them, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was, in reality, a wicked witch, who lay in wait for children, and had only built the house of bread in order to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she killed it, cooked, and ate it, and that was a feast day with her. Witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but they have a keen scent like the beasts and are aware when human beings draw near. When Hansel and Gretel came into her neighborhood, she laughed with malice, and said mockingly, "I have them. They shall not escape me again." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she was already up, and when she saw both of them sleeping and looking so pretty with their plump and rosy cheeks, she muttered to herself, "That will be a dainty mouthful." Then she seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him into a little stable, and locked him in behind a grated door. Scream as he might, it would not help him. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she was awoke, and cried, "Get up, lazy thing, fetch some water, and cook something good for your brother. He is in the stable outside, and is to be made fat. When he is fat, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain, for she was forced to do what the wicked witch commanded. And now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the woman crept to the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger that I may feel it, if you will soon be fat enough." Hansel, however, stretched out a little bone to her, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger, and was astonished that there was no way of fattening him. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still remained thin, she was seized with impatience and would not wait any longer. "Now then, Gretel," she cried to the girl, "stir yourself and bring some water. Let Hansel be fat or lean. Tomorrow I will kill him and cook him." Ah, how the poor little sister did lament when she had to fetch the water, and how her tears did flow down her cheeks. "Dear God, do help us," she cried. "If the wild beasts in the forest had but devoured us, we should at any rate have died together." "Just keep your noise to yourself," said the old woman. "It won't help you at all." Early in the morning Gretel had to go out and hang up the cauldron with the water, and light the fire. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which flames of fire were already darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly heated, so that we put the bread in." And once Gretel was inside, she intended to shut the oven and let her bake in it, and then she would eat her too. But Gretel saw what she had in mind, and said, "I do not know how I am to do it. How do I get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman, "the door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." And she crept up and thrust her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a push that drove her far into it and shut the iron door and fastened the bolt. Oh, then she began to howl quite horribly, but Gretel ran away, and the godless witch was miserably burnt to death. Gretel, however, ran like lightning to Hansel, opened up his little stable, and cried, "Hansel, we are saved, the old witch is dead." Then Hansel sprang like a bird from its cage when the doors opened. How they did rejoice and embrace each other and dance about, as if they had no longer any need to fear her. They went into the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests full of pearls and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and thrust into his pockets whatever could be got in. And Gretel said, "I too will take something home with me," and filled her pinafore full. "But now we must be off," said Hansel, "that we may get out of the witch's forest." When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a great stretch of water. "We cannot cross," said Hansel. "I see no footplank and no bridge." "And there is also no ferry," answered Gretel. "But a white duck is swimming there. If I ask her, she will help us over." Then she cried, little duck, dost thou see? Hansel and Gretel are waiting for thee. There is never a plank or a bridge in sight. Take us across on thy back, so white." The duck came to them, and Hansel seated himself on its back and told his sister to sit by him. "No," replied Gretel, "that will be too heavy for the little duck. She shall take us across one after the other." The good little duck did so, and when they were once safely across and had walked for a short time, the forest seemed to be more and more familiar to them, and at length they saw from afar their father's house. Then they began to run, rushed into the parlor, and threw themselves round their father's neck. The man had not known one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest. The woman, however, was dead. Gretel emptied her pinafore until pearls and precious stones ran about the room, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pocket to add to them. Then all anxiety was at the end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. My tale is done. There runs a mouse. Whoever catches it may make himself a big fur cap out of it. Okay, the end. um, okay, Hansel and Gretel. Somewhat what I remember. Impalia wants us to go into a new server. No problem. So we'll start the 5-minute break. I'll rest my eyes a second. Unable to connect to game server. Okay. It's disconnected. That is not a problem. We'll just go AFK scene on my plot when we get back. And then we'll read over the summary and the theory similar to what we did. Hansel and Gretel, Brothers Grimm. Summary. Hansel and Gretel is one of the most famous fairy tales collected by the Grimm brothers. First published in 1812, it tells the story of two siblings who were abandoned in the forest, outwit a cannibalistic witch, and return home with treasure. Although remembered as a children's story, it reflects the harsh realities of medieval Europe, including famine, poverty, and the difficult choices families sometimes faced during times of scarcity. Plot summary. Poverty and abandonment. Hansel and Gretel live with their father, a poor woodcutter, and their stepmother. The earliest versions simply describe her as their mother. During a severe famine, the mother convinces the father to abandon the children in the forest because there is not enough food for everyone. Hansel secretly overhears the plan. He fills his pockets with white pebbles and drops them along the path, allowing the children to find their way home. Mind you, the summaries are all from ChatGPT. I'm not doing my homework and reading about this before. This is just ways that AI is actually helpful with just doing things and talking about things you enjoy. I enjoy all the motifs and allegories and metaphors that come with fairy tales. I like writing short stories, and I like the way that folklore kind of leaves an impression. Lost in the forest. The second time they are abandoned, Hansel cannot collect pebbles and instead drops breadcrumbs. Birds eat the crumbs. The children become hopelessly lost in the forest. This marks the beginning of their true test. 3. The gingerbread house. After wandering for days, their discovery of a house made of bread, cake, and sugar. And as they are hungry, they begin eating it. An old woman invites them inside, but she appears kind. As she appears kind, she's actually a witch who fattens children so she can eat them. Hansel is locked in a cage while Gretel is forced to cook and clean. Outsmarting the witch repeatedly checks whether Hansel is fat enough by asking him to hold out a finger. Hansel cleverly offers her a small bone instead. Eventually, the impatient witch decides to cook him anyway. She orders Gretel to look inside the oven. Pretending not to understand, Gretel tricks the witch into demonstrating. Gretel pushes the witch into the oven and closes the door. The witch dies. Homecoming. The children discover jewels and precious stones inside the witch's house. They fill their pockets with treasure. After crossing a river, they return home. Their father welcomes them with joy. The mother has died while they were away, and the family's poverty ends because of the treasure. Main characters: Hansel, representing intelligence, planning, optimism, and courage. His pebble strategy and deception of the witch shows resourcefulness under pressure. Gretel. Although Hansel begins as the strategist, Gretel becomes the true hero. She demonstrates bravery, quick thinking, and independence. She is the one who defeats the witch and saves them both. The witch represents greed, predatory exploitation, false hospitality. She appears nurturing but intends to consume the children. The father symbolizes weakness and guilt. He loves his children but lacks the courage to resist abandoning them. The mother embodies desperation and selfishness. Whether viewed as cruel or as someone driven by starvation, she represents the destructive effects of extreme poverty. Major themes here are survival, poverty, growing up, good versus evil, family loyalty. Survival. The central theme is survival. Hansel and Gretel overcome overwhelming obstacles through intelligence, cooperation, perseverance. Poverty. The story begins with famine. The children's abandonment is driven not by hatred, but by scarcity. The Grimm brothers reflected the historical reality that hunger shaped many people's lives. Growing up, the children leave home dependent on adults. By the end, they have learned to rely on themselves. The journey through the forest becomes a rite of passage into maturity. Good versus evil. The witch appears kind, but hides evil intentions. The tale warns that appearances can be deceptive. Family loyalty. Despite hardship, Hansel and Gretel never abandon one another. Their mutual support is essential to their survival. Symbols here are the forest, the unknown, danger, and the challenges of growing up. Breadcrumbs, hope that disappears, plans that fail. White pebbles, wisdom, foresight, and careful planning. Gingerbread house, temptation, false security, and the dangers of appearances. Oven, justice, transformation, and reversing the balance of power. Jewels, reward, blah, 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 blah. Jewels, reward earned through courage and perseverance. Theory, folkloric, and literary. The story follows a classic folktale pattern: separation from home, dangerous journey, supernatural enemy, clever victory, return with rewards. I don't know why the word reward is so hard for me to say right now, but it is. The departure, trial, return structure appears in many cultures and reflects universal experiences of hardship and growth. Psychoanalytical theory. From a psychoanalytical perspective, the forest symbolizes the unconscious or the uncertainty of growing up. The witch can represent destructive desires or fears that children must confront. The gingerbread house symbolizes temptation, something that appears comforting but conceals the danger. The children's victory represents psychological maturity and the ability to overcome fear. Feminist theory. Although Hansel is initially the planner, Gretel ultimately saves them both. Her decisive action challenges traditional passive roles often assigned to female characters, making her one of the Grimm collection's most active heroines. Main meaning. At its heart, Hansel and Gretel is about overcoming fear and hardship through courage, intelligence, and cooperation. It shows that even those who seem powerless can survive by thinking creatively and supporting one another. The tale also acknowledges that poverty can force people into terrible decisions, while affirming that resilience and hope can lead to renewal. The central message of Hansel and Gretel can be summarized as: intelligence and courage are often stronger than physical strength. Family, family loyalty and cooperation help people overcome adversity. Tempting appearances can hide real dangers, so wisdom and caution are essential. Perseverance through hardship. Hey, Daisy, get away from her. Daisy. Thank you, baby. Perseverance through hardship can ultimately lead to safety and a better future. Commentary. Hansel and Gretel is more than a story about escaping a witch. It is a tale about confronting the harsh realities of life. The abandoned children symbolize vulnerability in a world marked by hunger and uncertainty, while the forest represents the difficult transition from dependence to self-reliance. Gretel's defeat of the witch marks the moment when the children reclaim control over their lives. The story's enduring appeal comes from its blend of fear, hope, and triumph. It acknowledges that the world can be dangerous and unfair, yet it offers an optimistic conclusion. Resourcefulness, mutual support, and moral courage can help people overcome even the darkest circumstances. Wah! Now that all of that is done, let's exit out of that.